result of the photography taking some of there. There's a medium-range ballistic missile launch site and 2 new military encampments.
How far advanced is this?
Sir, we've never seen this kind of an installation before.
Only a few people knew of the existence of the surveillance photographs, much less the terrifying revelations they held. In October 1962, the Soviet Union was constructing nuclear launch sites in Cuba, within range of every major city on the eastern seaboard, including the U.S. capital.
It's hard to realize how frightened they were. They had conversations about evacuating great parts of the United States. They had estimates about how many tens of millions of people would die. They really thought that war was near.
Managing this crisis fell to a rookie president, John F. Kennedy. He was less than 2 years on the job, the youngest man ever elected to the office.
Nothing prepared him for this. The things that got him elected, the acute politician, the charming vote-getter, the money, the glamour, none of it had any bearing at all on his situation.
The qualities that had carried John Kennedy to the presidency, natural rebelliousness, stubborn self-reliance, spectacular self-confidence, had also led him to make mistakes and missteps that helped put the country in mortal danger. His predecessor in the White House, Dwight Eisenhower, had called him Little Boy Blue and thought his wealthy father had bought him the office. The Soviet premier, Nikita Khrushchev, had taken Kennedy's measure at their first meeting a year earlier, and he walked away believing he could get the better of the untested president. If John F. Kennedy doubted himself or quailed at the enormity of the situation, he didn't show it.
He had a very great ability to step back, to be cool, to be detached, to not get sucked in by the passions of the moment, to not just ride the wave.
When he became angry, he tended to become very calm. There was a kind of burning anger in him that he didn't express very openly.
This man was fiercely independent, intellectually independent, fiercely. Kennedy had an unshakable sense of his own skills. He was confident about his ability to come up with the right answer. He wasn't bringing people together in a room to hammer out a consensus. He was bringing people in a room to give him the best information so that he could make the decision.
He had what he called the great man theory of governing. As a consequence, it put a lot of pressure on him.
Now, at a moment of peril and uncertainty, he would be forced to answer the question that had dogged him his entire career. Was he as tough, as smart, as capable as he appeared?
Good evening, my fellow citizens. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. Miss Lincoln, is this taped in? Is this plugged in? Is this plugged in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 19. I was the descendant of 3 generations on both sides of my family of men who had followed the political profession. In my early life, the conversation was nearly always about politics, period.
By the time he came of age, John Fitzgerald Kennedy inhabited a world of special exemption. The family estate in suburban New York, the summer compound in Hyannisport, the winter retreat in Palm Beach. The story of his family's heroic multi-generational rise from the want of Irish famine might well have been a misty old folktale. The past was not the point in the Kennedy household. Jack's father, Joseph P. Kennedy, was one of the wealthiest men in America. An Irish Catholic businessman who had grabbed his fortune in the WASP-dominated world of high finance, and then became a celebrated administrator in President Franklin Roosevelt's momentous New Deal government. Joe Kennedy expected his sons in particular to have a large effect on the world.
He's a model of what they're taught to emulate. He's striving, he's reaching, he's always on the move, he's accomplishing, and it was expected of them to do the same thing.
They were very pampered and enabled. They were made to feel special, which is good, and they were special, and they were made to feel obliged to serve their country. That was great. But they were also given a kind of confidence that it would always go well for them.
After the stock market crash occurred in 1929, John Kennedy didn't know that there was all this privation in the country. He never wanted for a meal, and it wasn't until he read something later in high school and college about the Depression that it registered on his consciousness.
Even in the raucous Kennedy clan, even among his 8 brothers and sisters, Jack stood out. He kept his own schedule, usually late. He was apt to test the patience of his elders, unconcerned with rules and loose with money. He plied shopkeepers with the promise that his father would pay the bill, whatever it was.
Jack would expect maids to take care of him, cook his meals, do his laundry, pick up his clothes. And so he has a very privileged childhood, except for one thing, that he is burdened by a series of considerable health problems.
Jack almost died of scarlet fever in 1920, just before his 3rd birthday. 2 years later, a case of whooping cough landed him in another quarantine ward. Soon after, his parents shipped him off to a prestigious boarding school in Connecticut. Jack's letters home began to include reports of his shaky health. At Choate, Jack's ongoing digestive ailments made him a reliable customer of the campus infirmary.
Jack didn't know what was wrong with him. All he knew was that on a regular basis, he would take sick, get a high fever, end up in the hospital, that he couldn't gain weight, that he couldn't run around and play sports the way he wanted to.
He was terribly thin. He had recurrent bouts of nausea and vomiting, continual bouts of high fever, and he was tired all the time.